Hello everyone, this is Poohead189, and today we are going to be discussing a topic that tends to get argued in the fandom quite a bit, and it is who is to blame the most for Cell becoming perfect. Now, there is the obvious two. The two people that people always mention is Vegeta and Krillin, but we're not going to go there yet because I feel like that's sort of losing the focus on the main question. What we're going to do is we're going to sort of go through all the characters that even have something tangentially related to this to see really who has the most blame. And I know, when someone says who is to blame for Cell becoming perfect, they mean at the tail end of him becoming perfect, like right when it's occurring. But, there's a lot of things that happened beforehand that led to him becoming perfect. Now, something that is very obvious, but that no one ever mentions, it's probably because it is obvious, but also the fact that no one mentions it makes people lose the plot, is that the two people that are most, or the two characters that are most responsible for Perfect Cell becoming perfect is Dr. Gero and Cell himself. Again, it's very obvious, but it's true. Dr. Gero had a hand, he literally did create Cell. Cell would not exist without him. And then he set the supercomputer to finish the work, or to, allow Cell to continue as he was growing. But Dr. Gero designed and made Cell. And of course, Cell himself, once he was out of the vat, he went after the androids, and it was through his actions and decisions that led to him becoming perfect. So those two are the biggest ones to blame. Now, of course, when people say to blame something, they're meaning that the people who should be trying to stop it rather than the people who are rooting for it to occur. That is true. But if we're going to talk fault, then it is Dr. Gero and Cell. And of course, you can also make the argument that, if it wasn't for Goku stopping the Red Ribbon Army, then Dr. Gero would have never made the androids or Cell. And you can say, if Cell wasn't programmed this way, then he probably wouldn't have gone after them anyway. And you could say stuff like that, but you can say that about anything. I mean, you could say something like, if it wasn't for Frieza killing Krillin, then Goku would have never been able to, or then Gohan would have never been able to defeat Cell, because Goku went Super Saiyan because of Frieza, and then Goku could teach Gohan how to be a Super Saiyan, and that led Gohan to becoming Super Saiyan 2, and then he beat Cell. So, you can say this about anything. That really means nothing. So, the two main characters who are at fault and who are to blame for Cell becoming perfect is Cell and Dr. Gero. But after that, let's go a little bit closer to when he becomes perfect, but not entirely at the same time. There are 5 main characters at the time, at least amongst the Z fighters, that people generally acknowledge. There is Tien, Vegeta, Trunks, Piccolo, and Krillin. Those are the 5 main actors. And of course, without mentioning Cell. And of course, there's also Android 18, who is key to Cell becoming perfect. Now, many people, for some reason, mention Trunks and Piccolo are partially to blame, tangentially, sort of from little innocuous sort of reasons. And people don't often mention Tien is to blame at all, which is good, but I don't think any of the 3 of them should be blamed at all. They were the ones that actively fought against it, and did so through great trials, right? Tien and Piccolo risked their lives heavily to stop Cell from becoming perfect, and Trunks was willing to fight his own father, potentially even to the death, in order to stop it. So, yes, could Tien have maybe used his Tri-Beam earlier? Sure. Could Piccolo have attacked Android 18 first and maybe destroyed her? Might have been a little bit easier, so, maybe he chose wrong and provoking 17. Or maybe, Trunks could have obliterated 18 or, gone harder against Cell. Sure, you can make these little statements about that, but I think it's super bad faith to blame any of those guys, any of those 3 guys, to say that they are to blame for Cell becoming perfect, because they all risked a lot in order to try to keep that from occurring. And that's a bit like, like a 9/11 first responder going to the burning buildings, and they make a small mistake, and then, and then maybe someone gets hurt from it. It's just like, well, no, the people that crashed into the building is to blame, not the rescuers that might have made a mistake. It's in intrinsically bad faith, in my opinion. Now, something else that people don't tend to mention is that, Cell could not become complete if he did not also reach his second form, right? And the person to blame for Cell reaching his second form the most, other than Cell himself, is probably Android 17. It is through his arrogance and lack of care and his bravado that led to Cell being able to sneak up behind him and absorb him, right? Now, of course, Android 17 was hell-bent on proving that he could defeat Cell and that he was the strongest being there ever was. And while it is true that 17 was really strong at the time, it is also true that he was not a match for Imperfect Cell. And even after Android 16 damaged Imperfect Cell, even if Android 17 might have been stronger than Imperfect Cell at that time from the damage, Cell didn't defeat him by overpowering him. Cell just snuck up on him, something that could have easily been avoided if Android 17 was not hellbent on proving that he was the strongest, and his pride getting in the way. It was almost as prideful as Vegeta. In fact, it's probably about as prideful as Vegeta. So Android 17 really is to blame for Perfect Cell being complete as much as Krillin or Vegeta, because, without second form Cell, then there couldn't have been third form Cell. So yeah, we do need to take that into account. Now for the big two that people tend to really blame is Vegeta and Krillin. Now, as we know, it is through Krillin and Trunks' efforts going into the basement of Jiro's lab to find the blueprints that allowed Bulma and her father to create the device that could shut the androids down. So there is something on Krillin's side here. And then, of course, while Tien and Piccolo go off with the androids in order to combat them, Krillin went to meet Bulma, and then he got the device. And then, of course, he arrives in the battlefield, and he finds Android 18 before anyone else. And, he has a sort of, not really a crisis of faith. We'll call it the classic DIA syndrome, which is Dick in action. Now, yes, it is slightly more complicated than that because, one, Android 18 hadn't done anything wrong up till that point, at least as far as Krillin knew. Now, Android 18 and 17 did end up injuring some police, and Android 18 did dodge a blast that Vegeta shot at her that obliterated a trucker, but in general, neither Android 17 or 18 went on a killing spree or frenzy like they had in Trunks' future, at least as of yet. So far, she'd been pretty blameless. Secondly, even though they completely dominated the Z fighters earlier in the big android fight on the side of the road, they never killed anybody there either. They seemed to have almost not an aversion to killing, but they really did not care for it, unless it was necessary. And so, to Krillin's mind, even without him being immensely horny, this was an innocent woman. And of course, we also need to put into the fact that Krillin did need to be very close to Android 18 to turn her off, which means, and then he also needed to destroy her. So once he got close enough to use the button and shut her off, he would then need to power up and destroy her, and to get close to Android 18, who can completely kill him, and get close to Android 16, who, even though he is damaged at the time, could still likely completely kill Krillin. It was also rather dangerous for him. So we do need to incorporate that in our calculations. And then, of course, we have Vegeta. You know me, I quite like shitting on Vegeta because he does make a lot of horrible decisions. But in a strange way, Vegeta's physiology had just as much to do with his sparing of second form Cell as Krillin's did for sparing Android 18. Because while Krillin's physiology was him really wanting to bend her over a table, Vegeta's physiology was telling him, I want a strong opponent to fight. Because remember, Saiyan physiology is different from Earthling physiology. When we want sex, Saiyans want a fight. Now, again, I said this in my Saiyan video I made about a year ago. Saiyans fighting is not like foreplay to them. It's not like it's not like they get a boner from beating people up, but Saiyans have a sort of biological imperative to fight. It's intrinsic in their DNA. Just like how it is intrinsic in our DNA to, generally, at least in general, to, have sex and have a family and spread across the world. So Vegeta was being influenced from his physiology. It wasn't just his arrogance. And that's not to excuse it, but I'm just saying, if we incorporate Krillin's sort of horniness, we have to incorporate Vegeta's sort of Saiyan need to fight someone and to have a strong opponent. Now, we could say that Vegeta knew that Goku was now in the time chamber and would be coming out and would be someone that Vegeta still had the goal to not only beat, but to kill. So Vegeta did have a strong opponent coming on the way anyway. So that is a mark against Vegeta as well. But I just wanted to reiterate and say that yes, it was a part of Vegeta's physiology just as much as Krillin's physiology. Although I will say a large part of it was Vegeta's arrogance, whereas a large part of Krillin's feeling that wasn't horniness was benevolence. However, I would think that both are pretty equal to blame. It really depends on what you consider blame is. If you consider blame to be a physical act that changed the trajectory of what occurred, then both are of equal blame. However, if you consider blame with sort of a more nuanced approach of understanding, then Krillin is less to blame than Vegeta, because Vegeta's motivations in this, while not entirely based on pride and arrogance and evil, is far more in that vein than Krillin's. Krillin's, when it's not horniness, is completely altruistic. So, if you think that the blame is a mere physical act, then it is Krillin, Android 17, and Vegeta. And before you think that Android 17 might be to blame the most because he doesn't have this physiological imperative like Krillin and Vegeta, even if it is just fighting a strong opponent and doing a 69 with a hot blonde, we also need to acknowledge that Dr. Gero did mess with Android 17 and 18's minds. They were programmed, and he did perform what we can assume is neurosurgery on them. So Android 17 was also potentially not in his right mind either. However, that doesn't excuse any of these three. These three are the most to blame. But if you blame Krillin and Vegeta, then you also need to blame 17 the most with them. And of course, beyond them, you need to blame Cell and Dr. Gero the most out of everyone ever. But if you want to take it into a more sort of, let's be more understanding, then I think probably the people to blame the most is 17 and Vegeta, and then Krillin is still very high up there, but he's right behind him. Because, as I said before, he had a more moral view of it than either of them. They just wanted to prove themselves. And then, of course, Cell becomes complete, and, the rest is history. Although I will say, and I don't think he is really to blame for this, but I will say that it is possible that if Goku and Gohan went into the time chamber first, or even if it was just Goku, and he got out when Vegeta would have, then he probably would have gone there, and he probably would have just defeated Cell as a Master Super Saiyan, and just ended it. Right? Now, I will say that there are some people, including friend of the channel Dave, or at least he said this before, that Goku might be just as susceptible to allowing Cell to become complete as Vegeta. I don't believe that. Goku's definitely done stuff like that before. He's let Vegeta escape. He's given a Senzu Bean to Piccolo. He let Frieza live. He's done various things that are like that are extremely morally questionable. But I do think that Cell Saga Goku, as shown with Super Saiyan 2 Gohan and Perfect Cell telling him to just finish him off, I do think that Goku would have acted differently in this situation. But people, if you want to be sort of nitpicky, people can sort of maybe lay a small amount of blame on Goku for allowing Vegeta to go first in the time chamber to allow this set of events to happen when Goku could have just gone in fact, without even consulting Vegeta in the first place, and then Goku would have come out as a mastered Super Saiyan and then just gone and killed Second Form Cell and then just ended all of it. So you could maybe lay a little bit of blame on Goku, but then again, I believe that Vegeta also said, but if I'm coming, I need to go first. And I think Goku did want to hedge his bets and be like, I don't know if I can figure this out. Maybe Vegeta can. If we both try to figure this out, then this might be better than just me going in. However, with hindsight, it probably would have been better if Goku just went in first and didn't even consult Vegeta or maybe even Trunks or Gohan. Maybe he could have brought Gohan in, maybe it was training with someone that helped him reach that level. But one could make the argument if they were trying to play devil's advocate. However, I do think that Goku's area of blame is far below the top 5, which is Gero, Cell, Vegeta, Krillin, and 17. He's way below. Not as far down as Tien, Piccolo, and Trunks, who were actively attempting to stop Perfect Cell's perfection. But I really don't think Goku is to blame there. I just know that someone could maybe make that argument. And of course, you might also, thinking about it now, you might also be able to do the same sort of weird, roundabout logic and maybe blame Yamcha a little bit. Because, Yamcha is someone who's very popular with the ladies, but if he went there with the remote instead of Krillin, and if he had been more eager to help out after he had been impaled, which is understandable because after you're fucking impaled and then you are absorbed and then your energy is taken away from you, you don't really want to be flying around alone anymore because that's fucking traumatic. In fact, it's not even the impalement that did it. Yamcha says that the very act of having your energy absorbed was the traumatic part, which honestly makes the absorption androids sound very creepy. But you could make the argument that maybe it should have been someone else to have volunteered, and they should have known that Krillin might be such a virgin that he couldn't handle it. But again, I don't think that that's very fair to Yamcha either, just like it's not fair to Goku to have this sort of hindsight. So yeah, I would say Cell and Gero are the highest to blame, then it's Vegeta and 17, then it is Krillin, and then way below them it is trollishly Goku and Yamcha, and then below them are the 3 that actively risked themselves to stop it, which is Piccolo, Tien, and Trunks. Okay, guys, thanks for sort of exploring this with me. Obviously, this wasn't a scripted video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. It's something that people talk about a lot, and I felt like I should give my thoughts on it. And people don't really dive into it very much. They just sort of put Vegeta and Krillin up there, and they don't think about anybody else. And, for good reason, but if you think on it for more than 10 seconds, you'll be like, well, there's other people that we could talk about too. So I hope you enjoyed it. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I have my Discord and my social media in the links below. I apologize for the very little Dragon Ball videos I've done recently. I'm trying to expand a little bit more out there. Please share my videos if you can. I appreciate all of you. The links to my Patreon are down below too. Thank you so much to my patrons and all of you guys listening. All right, guys. See ya.